Hi, first grade. Today we're going to be talking about some of my favorite kind of stories. We're going to be talking about fairy tales. But before we get started talking about fairy tales, let's talk about some of the things that make a story a fairy tale. So, first of all, fairy tales are fantasy stories. That means they're made up, they're make believe, we use our imagination. They start with once upon a time and they end with happily ever after. A lot of the times, fairy tales will also have talking animals. They'll have characters that are good and evil. We call that good versus evil. A lot of the times, we see magic, like with witches and fairies. There's also royalty. So we might see castles, kings, queens, princesses, princes, all those fun things that we might see maybe in a Disney movie. And then, most importantly of all, fairy tales have a theme. A theme is a lesson that a story is trying to teach us. So, all fairy tales are going to have an important theme. They have a lesson that they're going to try to teach you. Let's get ready to listen to our own fairy tale. I'm going to tell you the story of Hansel and Gretel. Once upon a time, there were two children named Hansel and Gretel. They lived in the woods with their father and their evil stepmother. They did not have a lot of money or a lot of food. One day, the evil stepmother sent Hansel and Gretel into the woods. She wanted Hansel and Gretel to get lost so she did not have to feed them anymore. Hansel and Gretel got lost in the woods. Soon it started to get dark and they could not find their way home. They were so sad and so scared. Suddenly, Hansel and Gretel saw a cabin in the woods. They were saved! As they got closer to the cabin, they saw something amazing. The cabin was actually a giant gingerbread house, and it was made of candy. Hansel and Gretel ran to the house and started to eat it. Suddenly, they heard a strange voice calling them. It said, "Yoo-hoo, children! I have more candy inside. Won't you come in and see?" Hansel and Gretel looked in the window of the house. There was an old lady with gray hair and a black dress. Gretel did not want to go into this strange lady's house, but Hansel said, "Don't worry, Gretel. She's just a nice old lady who wants to feed us. Let's go inside and we'll be safe." Gretel agreed and followed him inside. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind them. The old lady started laughing as she put on her pointy black hat and took out a magic wand. Gretel yelled, "Careful! She's a witch!" The witch chased Hansel and Gretel around her kitchen so she could cook them up in her big pot of soup. All of a sudden, Gretel tripped the witch and pushed her into the oven. Hansel and Gretel ran outside to get away from the witch. When they got outside, they found their father. He had found out the evil stepmother had sent Hansel and Gretel into the woods to get lost. He was so angry that he sent her away and went looking for Hansel and Gretel. Now that the witch was dead, Hansel, Gretel, and their dad moved into the witch's candy house. They were never hungry again, and they lived happily ever after. What a great story that just was. Now that we have that story fresh in our minds, we're going to talk a little bit more about the theme. Remember, the theme is the lesson that a fairy tale is trying to teach us. So up here I have some choices. So my question says, what is the theme of Hansel and Gretel? Let's look at our choices and try to choose the best one. A, witches are easy to trick. B, don't trust strangers, even if they seem nice. Or C, always trust your parents. These all sound like really important lessons, but I can only choose one. So let me try to cross some of these out. So let's look at my choices. What is the theme or lesson of Hansel and Gretel? A, witches are easy to trick. I don't really think so. I remember that Gretel did trick the witch, but it wasn't very easy. Next, B says, don't trust strangers, even if they seem nice. Well, that's definitely an important lesson, and I know that that's something that Hansel and Gretel learned. So let me just double check to make sure that my last answer doesn't make more sense. C says, always trust your parents. I'm not sure that this is a good answer because Hansel and Gretel trusted their stepmother to let them go into the woods, and she was trying to trick them. So I know it can't be C. So that just leaves me with B. The theme of Hansel and Gretel is don't trust strangers, even if they seem nice. And I like that lesson because that's something you guys could use in your real life too. You should never trust strangers, no matter how nice they seem. Now we're going to get to our second part. We know that this is our theme, that we should not trust strangers, even if we seem nice. But now our job is to prove it. So we need to provide text evidence to support your claim. That means you need to figure out what happened in the story that proves that this theme is true. So what happened in the story that proves to us that we should not trust strangers, even if they seem nice? Let me look at my choices. A, Hansel and Gretel got lost in the woods. They did get lost in the woods, but a stranger did not send them into the woods. I know that can't be my answer. B, Gretel pushed the witch into the oven. That did happen in the story, but that doesn't have to do with our theme about not trusting strangers. So we'll cross that one out too and check to see if my last one is correct. The last choice says, the witch tricked Hansel and Gretel into thinking she was friendly when she was really evil. That sounds pretty good. Let me see if it matches my theme. Don't trust strangers, even if they seem nice. Well, I know that the witch was a stranger, but she tricked Hansel and Gretel into thinking she was nice, and that was a mistake because then she tried to cook them in her big pot of soup, and that's just not okay. So we know that C is the answer. So let me just go over this again. The theme of Hansel and Gretel is don't trust strangers, even if they seem nice. And the thing that happened in the story, the text evidence that proves that this theme is true, is that the witch tricked Hansel and Gretel into thinking she was friendly when she was really evil.